Yes, good afternoon, good evening, folks. It's so lovely to see you here. Thank you all so much for being here. Dean, the dance moves come out every week in the chat feature. Like it's just a thing. Like, so thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for tuning in today as well. If you haven't already, do pop in the chat feature where you're watching from. Don't forget to switch your messages to everyone, so everyone can see your messages, not just the hosts and panelists. So if you presently see two hosts and panelists, make sure to click that and you'll see an option for everyone, and we'll go from there. I can see folks tuning in from, well, we've got Amanda in Los Angeles, which is amazing. We've got Glasgow, Cheltenham, Chloe in Southeast London, Selena, the lovely Selena in Norwich, London, Windsor, St Ives, Cyprus, London, Hertfordshire. It just goes on. We've got people in Serbia as well, which is pretty bloody wicked. Yeah, it's wicked.
We truly have a global audience. This is great.
It's a very, very great bunch. I hope today, actually, so this will be, Amanda, this will be one of your first times being exposed to the Marketing Meetup community, right?
I think so, yeah.
Well, here we go. So let's do ourselves proud today, everyone in the chat feature, and show Amanda how truly special it is. Let's get going. So 2 challenges, as ever, that exist for every Marketing Meetup event. The first is after today's session, whether it's this evening or tomorrow morning, if you get a takeaway from today's session, please do share it. It makes the world of difference, and it's the type of thing that can keep this conversation going on between all of us. And so please do that. And then the second thing is, as we can see right now with the chat feature and people tuning in from Andorra and London and Chelmsford and all these folks from across the world, then the second challenge is all about keeping that chat feature going throughout the duration of today's session. For some of us in the UK, it's sort of towards the last bit of our working day. And with that in mind, then I feel like you got permission to engage and sort of just spend the time investing in you just to finish off this Tuesday and make it really, really brilliant. With all that said, let's get going to introducing today's guest. So today we have Amanda Natividad, who is the VP of Marketing at Spark Toro. Amanda is a Twitter celebrity and a houseplant god, although you might need to see her LinkedIn headline to understand that reference. And today represents a bit of a moment. So Rand Fishkin, the founder of Spark Toro, was the first speaker in our webinar series 937 days ago when COVID kicked off and we had to move all of our events online. In the 2.5 years since, I've seen Spark Toro grow as a force, and Amanda is a very central part of all of that growth, which is absolutely incredible and so inspirational. Also, the Marketing Meetup over these past couple of years has welcomed literally tens of thousands of marketers to our webinar schedule, which was in part down to that momentum that Rand in that first webinar gave us way back when, 937 days ago. So tonight we're sort of having this full circle moment, and I'm so proud to share it with all of you. And I just want to say thank you as well for this past period. So let's share this pretty magical moment tonight and have some fun. Today we're going to be speaking zero-click content, which is something many marketers are unaware of, or even if they are aware of, don't know how to take advantage. So in this session, we're going to explore it. That's what it's all about. Today is a talk and then a Q&A, so do get your questions in using the Q&A feature, which is found down below. You can wiggle your mouse, and you'll see the Q&A feature, and that would be really lovely if we can get some questions from the community too. This isn't about Amanda or I, it's actually about all of you tuning in today, and the only way that we make it even more special for all of you is to take a moment to answer your questions. So please do take that opportunity. Last thing for me to do is to say a big thank you to our sponsors. And this week's featured sponsor is Brand Recruitment, who are a recruitment agency based in Cambridge and have been supporters of the Marketing Meetup since day one. They're lovely, lovely people. The thing that Brand Recruitment want us to let you know about this week is their salary survey, which is going to be coming out very soon. And I'm going to be sending out a link in the newsletter that's going to be coming up following this session with a link to that salary survey. They'd really, really appreciate it if you filled it in, and in return, you'll get back the report from Brand Recruitment that says, here's where you should be benchmarking your own salary. Slightly contentious, but very, very useful nonetheless if you're going into your next review or looking for your next job. I also want to say a big thank you to Impression, Content Square, Attest, HRS, Redgate, Cambridge Marketing College, and indeed Brand Recruitment. We wouldn't be able to bring these sessions to you if it wasn't for them. So a big thank you to all of those. We'll feature those on rotation for the following weeks. With all that said, now is the time that I pass over to Amanda. So thank you so much for taking the time, and it's over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for that lovely intro and for setting the tone here. Really appreciate it. And everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us in the chat. Like it's not very often that I have the honor of joining a webinar and community where people are so engaged in the chat. So it's really lovely to see your names and your reactions, your opinions popping up. So I hope throughout this presentation that you feel comfortable continuing to share your thoughts. I do have my presentation set up that I need to get on the screen. I'll do my best to look at the chat and see if anyone has quick questions I can address real time. I will try to do that. Otherwise, I'll make sure we get to that at the end.
Well, an absolute pro there, Amanda. And likewise, I can try and chime in if there's anything that pertinent comes up. So I'll give you a helping hand as we go. So
great. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to assume that Joe will wave frantically and scream if he cannot see it.
You're all good. You're perfect. That's great.
All right. So today we are going to talk about the art of zero-click content. What is this? How can we do it? Why do we need to do it? Let's get started. So when we think about, marketing as we know it, right? When you market your content, when you market really anything, let's say on social media, here's how we used to do it, right? How it started, we would do posts like this, right? We would try to write some kind of, want to know X, so want to know some enticing thing, join our webinar. Or maybe we would give some kind of relatable statement to help someone feel seen, maybe. Relatable statement, read the blog with a link to the blog. Or sometimes we try to go into another kind of intriguing question and then provide the context and then read this, right? Pretty normal, pretty standard format, right? I think we've all done this, and I think I still do this sometimes. But does it really work? Is it really effective? Here's how it's going. So that first example that I had, that webinar, 2 retweets and 3 likes. The second example had 1 retweet and 6 likes. Third one had 3 retweets, 16 likes. That one fared best. But as we dive into, well, what about each of them, right? Maybe they had smaller audiences, right? Maybe they were newer entrants to the space. But the first one has over 130,000 followers. It's a verified account, and it's a government organization. Second one is 80,000 followers and more, also a verified account, and it's by an individual person, a credible author, actually. And the third one is, 16,000 plus followers, also a very niche interest, and it's a pretty young account. It's only just about 1 year old. So it's not going that great, right? The content that we just went through, it all looked pretty normal and standard. There wasn't really anything seemingly wrong with it, right? But clearly it's not driving a ton of great results here. But why? Why is it not driving better results? Sorry, I have some notes. Why is it not driving better results, right? So here's where I think we could be stuck in some kind of chicken or egg situation, right? Where maybe the algorithms have trained us, or we've trained the algorithms, right? Where we no longer see or engage with that type of teaser content. Maybe it's a little bit of both, right? And how does this actually affect the platforms, right? So for one, a few things to know is Google is putting answers directly in the SERP, the search engine results page. I think a lot of us here probably know this, right? In 2020, 65% of Google searches ended without a click. And this can be good for users For instance, if you're searching for Paul Rudd's height, right? You type in Paul Rudd height, answers right there. That's a pretty good user experience, right? You don't need to read a blog post about Paul Rudd's height. Maybe you want to read a blog post about his anti-aging secrets, but maybe not for the height. Or there are times when this can be really bad for publishers and small businesses. So one really good example of this would be from the music lyric website, genius.com, right? So years ago, or a couple years ago, Genius accused Google of scraping their website and putting their song lyrics onto the SERP. Google denied it. And so Genius used a watermarking system with embedded patterns directly in its code. So they use this with certain formatting of apostrophes in its lyrics, using straight versus curved apostrophes. But then they shortly saw thereafter that Google's lyrics follow the same exact pattern, proving their point that Google was indeed scraping their websites, taking it, and then putting it directly on Google's properties. It's not great for us, right? But it's not just Google. It's also the social media platforms. The social media platforms reward native content. So things like threads, right? Twitter's algorithm favors threads over linked content, right? This guy, Sahil Bloom, has like 700,000 followers at this point, going viral all the time just with these threads. And something I think that's pretty interesting about Sahil that you might not know is he's been writing exclusively on Twitter. Like, I think he published threads, only threads on Twitter, right? No blog, no personal site, only threads on Twitter for I think about 2 years before even launching his newsletter, like his Substack or ConvertKit. So I think it's really interesting to see that this is somebody who grew his audience purely on social media, didn't link out to anything else, just through the native content experience. LinkedIn's algorithm is not that different. It favors comments over links, right? So you'll see people like me who put link below in the comments, right? You see that all the time now. And it just sort of feels like that's just what you do on LinkedIn. Or even Instagram. Instagram still doesn't even allow links in the captions, and neither does TikTok, by the way. And Instagram only recently, beginning of this year, began allowing links in stories for everybody, right? Not just for creators who have over 10,000 followers. And, beyond the three that I mentioned, it's also Reddit, Pinterest, Quora. They all favor in-platform content like linkless posts, images, and videos. TikTok and Snapchat are linkless, and YouTube, which, is sort of funny to call a social media platform, but if we did, I would note that they cut off video descriptions that include links. So the old way of marketing your content, your event, your product, your business just doesn't work anymore. Instead, what we need to do is, don't think about optimizing for Google. It's optimized for impressions, AKA now we have to write really, really good content, but it's hard. So how do we do this? How do we create great, share-worthy content people want to amplify, people want to just read, right? Through zero-click content, right? So through zero-click content, this is content that offers standalone value with no need to click. Clicking is only additive to the experience. It is not required. So, we see this everywhere, actually. Once you understand what zero-click content is, you sort of can't unsee it. So we can look at some examples, from our peers, right? So here's the first example, right? Rand Fishkin, right? Rand posts these great 2-minute videos directly on LinkedIn. He has like a whole post something about anything from maybe a quick SparkToro demo, or even just to some quick thoughts he has on marketing strategy or the tech ecosystem. All of these videos get hundreds of thousands of impressions, and these are far more than he gets than if he links to some kind of video platform. And the funny thing is, we have all these videos, and now within the SparkToro ecosystem, I don't even know where all of them are, because for a while, I've been posting them on Wistia to embed on the SparkToro website, but it's just sort of gotten to this point where, why? Right? Like there's no real reason for me or for Rand to spend all this extra time trying to gather all these videos, putting them into YouTube, putting them into Wistia, when we're not even sure that our content can get served up, right? So this is something we're still kind of thinking through. Other examples. So I also write a lot of threads. And in the case of my zero-click content idea, I wrote this longer form blog post about it, but I didn't just link to it on Twitter. I turned that into a thread, right? Basically just rewrote that blog post as a thread, got over 2,000 likes, over 500 retweets. It performed pretty well. It would not have performed that well had I just linked to the blog post with some kind of intriguing teaser. And it's not just us at SparkToro, right? People like Brendan Huffer, like creators on LinkedIn who are, writing and publishing consistently pretty much every day. He also writes these great sort of short form 150-word posts directly on LinkedIn. And through this, Brendan has been able to grow his audience, kick off his new newsletter called Growth Sprints, or it's called Growing Up, but it's for his, new consultancy called Growth Sprints, where he helps people grow their B2B SaaS companies. But, the play here is he didn't optimize his blog for just SEO and just go about that. I mean, maybe he'll think about that one day. I don't know, but purely through social media. And it's not even just us in this sort of B2B creator space, right? There are lots of other businesses and industries who do this. One of my favorite examples, because this is a direct-to-consumer brand, is Force of Nature Meats. So Force of Nature is a US-based regenerative agriculture direct-to-consumer company. So they sell meat in a box, frozen meat like bison, venison, all in a way that they're farmed in a way that it helps the environment, right? And they have over 90,000 Instagram followers who are super engaged with their content. So a chart like this, right? This doesn't mean a whole lot to me, or maybe to you right now, just at a glance. So it looks like it's a little hard to read, but all the information is right there, right? There's no blog post that's attached to this. Here's a chart of, I think what it is it's about a food scoring system. You could look it up later. All that info is directly in this post, got over 6,000 likes, performed super well. Other businesses and industries. This is sort of the original zero-click content artist, Howard Stern, right? He has over 1 million YouTube subscribers. And of course, he very famously has his show on Sirius XM. On SiriusXM, which is a paid subscription, that's where he has his long form interviews with celebrities, right? I think he's known for doing even upwards of 2 hours of just these super long form celebrity interviews. And he's done this way before podcasters started doing this, way before podcasts existed. And so at this point, what he does is he takes just the 2 to 5 minute clips of only the juiciest parts of his interviews, presents it as a sort of standalone video, posts it on YouTube, and everybody knows if they want to learn more, if they want to get the full context, they have to subscribe to SiriusXM. Here's another example, the last one here, I think. This one's kind of interesting. So Redfin is producing, or they have produced, a Netflix series, right? It's called Buy My House, or actually, I don't know if they produced it, but their CEO, Glenn Kelman, is on it. Right. So he's starring in this Netflix show about home buying and selling. So there's no question that he's going to give his insights and his advice on home buying and selling on Netflix, where people can get their standalone value from that show. They might not become Redfin customers, or they might not use Redfin, but this puts Redfin on this map of a really sort of interesting, very different kind of digital PR, where they're getting this brand awareness out there, but also Glenn Kelman will be giving his standalone insights in the form of a TV show. All right. Okay, so we went through all these sort of examples across different industries. Looks good, but how? Right? So it's not just, it's, first I started out by saying really, really good content, but how do we do this? So we have a couple of repeatable frameworks ahead, but I'll start out with a sort of this top line strategy for social media. So over on social media, one of the best things to do is to optimize for engagement streaks to get social visibility, followers, and traffic, right? Optimize for these engagement streaks. And you do this by giving the networks what they want, right? The content that keeps users on the platform, so no links, posts that earn either replies or repeat visits, clicks, kind of optimizing for that more so than likes or shares. And using visual and video formats, right? Maybe some shocking headlines and or surprising and unexpected content, right? Those are the things that the networks want you to give them. And also give your followers, your audience, what they want. So consistency of focus really is key, right? Sticking pretty closely to a niche. Because unfortunately, people tend not to like deviation from the initial reason that they followed you. So if you're posting on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever about, growth marketing, and then you suddenly deviate and start talking about like food, right? And that's not something that your followers came to you for, and that food content might not be that engaging for them. You can also give them high controversy and belief reinforcing content, right? So content that reinforces the things they already believe in. People love this kind of stuff. And finally, content that's just really easy to consume and process. Sometimes shorter, more visual, more emotional content tends to work well. Those threads work well, right? Say what you will about threads. They're a lot easier to read than, they're a lot easier to skim than anything else. And importantly, give your followers what they want, right? Your existing audience. So here's how I kind of think about this on this sort of scale from macro to micro. Sorry, I'll back up for a second. When you give your followers what they want, like the subject matter that they want, you're thinking about, one way to do this is to do the research to understand what it is that they want, right? So in this previous slide, when I talked about giving followers what they want, this is the sort of how to do it, right? Consistency of focus, belief reinforcing content that's easy to consume. But then what is it, right? What content do they want? So I think about this and doing this research as a sort of macro to micro scale. On the macro side, you have your industry or category trends. On your micro side, you have what your audience consumes. So on the macro level, you have things like you can look at tools like Google Trends, Exploding Topics, or BuzzSumo. This will give you a sense of, some of the trends or topics that are within your industry or your category. What your audience consumes, this could be, this would be like the podcast they listen to, the publications they read, things like that. But how do you go from, understanding an overall industry trend to knowing what your audience consumes? That's where you want to bridge the gap with tools like maybe SparkToro, doesn't have to be SparkToro, tools like Feedly, which gives you a sort of feed of the happenings in a given niche. A newstip.com, a great PR tool, which will also tell you which reporters are covering certain topics or beats. And frontpagemetrics.com. This is also a great tool for understanding some of the fastest growing subreddits. So all really good tools to help you bridge the gap from macro to micro. So once you know what topics to write about or what content to create, then, engage, draw traffic, repeat, right? High engagement, non-promotional post, another high engagement, non-promotional post. Then at some point you could sneak in your promotion with a call to action. Maybe it's that blog post. Maybe it is, your webinar sign up, another high engagement, non-promotional post, and another one. Right? You sort of get it, right? It's sort of, so these high engagement, non-promotional posts, it's These are the things that earn you brand exposure and new followers. And that promotion with the CTA, that is what capitalizes on your algorithmic reputation and sends clicks back to your site. So I like that, Joe. Jab, jab. I realize I haven't seen the chat and it's been hard to balance. I might kind of pause for a moment to take a peek here. You know what? I feel like I've been monologuing for quite a bit. So I would love for you to drop in the chat. What are some examples that you really like that you've seen of zero-click content? So I talked about, I showed Rand's social media, Brandon Hufford's. I gave the example of that Netflix show and Howard Stern. What are some examples of zero-click content that you like? Drop them in the chat. I scroll through a little bit.
I like that. I'll offer up a suggestion while we're going, which is I think Harry Dry of Marketing Examples is the absolute monarch of this sort of stuff. He seems to so his top level content is very much about sort of like image-based posts with very clear marketing examples, and then that leads over to his newsletter, which is further down, I guess further down the funnel for him, but he really seems to get it entirely well.
Yeah.
The thing that he misses, interestingly, is the promotion element, and I think that's quite an interesting thing, in that I think a lot of creators do a really great job at creating content, but then actually converting that into some sort of promotional element, and where that lands is an interesting thing. There you go.
Yeah, Harry is a great example because all of his content, like all of his tweets, all of it is stuff that you don't even need the context for what it is. It's just boom, all the value is right there. You could keep scrolling after that. You don't have to subscribe to learn more. I imagine that Harry's play is, I want to give the best possible content so that people eventually will subscribe. I imagine.
100%. It seems to be his vibe. He's done incredibly well from it. There's a few more examples that come into the chat just now.
Okay. So Hill mentioned Trinity London, a makeup brand, short form on Instagram, long form on YouTube. Oh, great example, right? So I'm sure you get the standalone actionable advice on Instagram. And if you really, really want to learn more or dive deeper into some kind of tutorial, then you'd probably look it up on YouTube. That's an excellent example. Thank you for that. Kimberly says Monzo. Megan says innocent smoothies. Simon points out Google weather. All totally true. All right. Okay, so now we have some 3 tactics for creating zero-click content. Now, these are not the only tactics, right? But these are the 3 that I could speak to based on the results that I've seen. All right, so here's one of mine, giving away the punchline. So this works really well for repurposing completed content. When I did this, okay, so this is the example that I have. I wrote this blog post about audience research personas. So it was just the idea of, why we marketers should think beyond traditional buyer personas and instead think more holistically about our audience. So an audience persona. And I wrote this long blog post on how to do it, what it means. And it sort of ended with this punchline of how this buyer persona template isn't all that helpful. But the way I posted it was that I wrote like 1,500 words on this post leading up to this particular punchline. Went ahead and led with that punchline. I got over 500 likes on this tweet. And when I used this, I did the same thing within our email promotion for the webinar version of this. It's been our most clicked on email promo this year, which performed really well. And we got over 900 registrants. I think we were just under 1,000. So it performed excellently. Tactic number 2, summarize the heart of your idea. So essentially repurposing that blog post, maybe you can share an outline, you can give items in a list, or you can give a standalone thought about one of those items in a list, right? So summarizing the heart of your idea. Remember, clicking is supposed to be optional here. So giving that standalone thought. And if you do this well, you can probably do this multiple times with one piece of content. So this example here is Force of Nature's email newsletter, right? They have simple 5 grilling tips. This doesn't even link to a blog post. It's just advice directly in their newsletter. So anybody who's scrolling through it, even if they don't want to click on anything, they'll see like, oh, cool. Like here are some takeaways for me that I can start using today. Another example, okay, Wes Ko, the co-founder of Maven, is also really good at this. So she has this longer blog post on something she calls the brand versus performance marketing spectrum. So she has a post that explains this in detail. And this here, this graph or this chart essentially summarizes that entire blog post just in one visual format. Works really well. Like I feel like this is immediately makes sense, right? Like you can understand like, or you can see like, okay, on one side of the spectrum, performance marketing focused on short-term conversion, brand marketing is focused more on long-term brand equity. Like it's pretty immediately clear. Yep, and her blog post on her personal site. All right, tactic number 3. I think this is the last one we'll go through. Post a defensible hot take. Defensible, that's the key point here. This works really well for long form content with full context. So this is sort of taking that Howard Stern approach, right? Of taking the juiciest part of something that has greater context attached to it. But Steph Smith, a creator and podcast host over at A16Z, she's really good at this. And it's important to note that if you're doing this, don't be salacious just for the sake of being salacious. So this is not about ruffling feathers just to make everyone mad. It's about posting this thing that you really believe in that is maybe contrary to popular belief or to the status quo. And then as this tweet or whatever this is, LinkedIn post gets engagement, you don't have to wait a long time, but maybe a couple hours after it takes off, then you add on that second tweet with a link to your call to action. So Steph Smith here, she did this tweet on the 40-hour work week was established over a century ago. Since then, we've invented 5G networks, automation, 3D printing, AR, VR, and a computer that can fit in your pocket. Nearly all of these tools have changed, yet somehow people still think the way we work needs to stay the same. So this is a pretty hot take, right? But it's not salacious just for the sake of it. And after that, you don't need to defend your claim. After that, she added on the link when she got engagement in which she defends the claim, right? So she dives into the 40-hour work week in her podcast episode, which is probably like 40 minutes or so. So this is where she defends her claim with that fuller context. So if you're following Steph or anybody who posts something like this, or if you're the one who's going to post this, rest assured that, your defense is going to be in that long form format. And I think you're going to get pretty good conversion on people who actually will take the time to see what you're talking about. Or if nothing else, even if they don't, they'll at least see, okay, this person has more to say about this thing. Maybe I don't have time for it, but you'll see that it isn't just ruffling feathers. All right. So, okay, what do I have here? But wait, right? What about executive buy-in, right? I think people are probably going to ask about this. I get this sometimes. One way I like to think about all this is when you create zero-click content, you're really just making your content, your marketing, and by extension, your business a lot more sustainable. Something I just call sustainable operations, because then that one blog post sets the foundation for 1 to 2 LinkedIn posts, maybe 1 Twitter thread plus 3 tweets, 1 video, 1 webinar, and maybe 1 conference presentation, right? All of this through 1 blog post. And does this actually work? Do people do this? Well, here's a little bit of proof, because the counterintuitive outcome here in the case of zero-click content is this. Remember that tweet that I had giving away the punchline, that goofy joke? Honestly, this stupid slide took me like 2 hours to make because I wanted it to be just right. I led with that punchline, got people to click. I sent them to my 2,000-word blog post where I defend my claim And then, do I have this here? Oh, I didn't have room for this on this slide. After this, hosted that office hours webinar where I further refined the thought, right? Where I kind of use that as sort of a test run on this fuller idea, where I was able to distill this into a presentation, kind of get some of that feedback. And by feedback, I mean feedback like today, right? Getting reactions to the chat, questions and Q&A, that's feedback. Using that to refine the idea even more, which then led to a speaking opportunity on stage in front of 700 people at MozCon, something I never in a million years thought I would ever do. So have faith in your content, double down on it, use it to power everything else in marketing that you do. All right, to learn more about audience research, my little plugs here, my shameless plugs. We have the SparkToro Audience Research newsletter. This is sent out every other Thursday, not this Thursday, next Thursday, you'll see it. Check out our free tools at SparkToro. We do have some free stuff like our fake follower audit, our trending topics, and Spark Score. And then, of course, regular SparkToro.com, where we give you audience research and data that looks like this. So in our database, if you were to search for people who self-identify as a marketing director, you'll see insights like their behaviors and demographics, things they talk about. You'll also see, you'll get lists essentially of the social accounts they follow, podcasts they listen to, YouTube channels they subscribe to, and the Reddit communities or subreddits that they also follow. And then for myself, if you want to learn more from me, I'm pretty active on Twitter. My personal site is amandanat.com, where I send a twice monthly-ish newsletter if I can ever get my act together. And then I also teach a marketing course over with Maven, Content Marketing 201. But yeah, that's all I have for today. And let's get into some Q&A.
Love it. Thank you so much, Amanda. That's really, really appreciated. And I think there's something quite special there, because I think what you put across in that session was a series of quite simple ideas, but actually things that actually the majority of us don't actually do on a day-to-day. We will quite often head into our blog, straight into WordPress and bosh out a 500 word blog post, or even a 1500 word blog post, and then just post it and kind of never see it again, so that's really appreciated. And it's just a tiny little mindset shift, but I think a useful one nonetheless. There's a couple of open questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to return to those. But for the meantime, I actually found it quite confronting in a pleasant way, zero click, the idea of zero click, because something that we see and hear as marketers so often is, get people to the website, get people to the website, get people to the website. And that's either from an SEO perspective, or that's also from a conversion perspective, driving people to convert on your site. So, and a lot of that is grounded in SEO. There's a lot of SEO buzz. There's a lot of SEO chat, and indeed Rand was part of that for a long time. So when you come to thinking about zero-click content and its relationship to SEO and its relationship to your website, which is not entirely disconnected, but it seems like we're definitely putting zero-clickers front and center. How do you think about those things and sort of break the convention when it comes to get people to the website?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one way I think about it is, I think it depends a lot on your niche and your audience. I'll say in the case of SparkToro, SparkToro is playing in a pretty new category, or at least in a category that I'm reluctant to say we don't have competitors, because of course we have competitors, but there isn't anyone who's doing exactly what we're doing, right? It's not like coffee beans. A coffee bean is a coffee bean. So we don't have a ton of direct competition. So we'll say we're in an emerging category. We're also in a space where content-wise, there's a lot of competition, super high competition to rank for things like, how to run a webinar, how to start a blog, What is a content marketing strategy, right? Like those are things that could be associated with SparkToro, but like, should we do that? Right? Is that going to be a good use of time? Like not for us specifically in what we do. So instead, what we write about the topics in marketing and in tech that only we have a perspective on, right? So like Rand has written about marketing attribution a couple of times because he has a bone to pick with it, right? And that's his unique point of view. Some people would agree with him, some people will not, right? For me, it was like the audience personas piece, right? Where like that was sort of a codifying or distillation of the way I had kind of intuitively approached marketing, where whenever I thought about creating content as a regular old content marketer, I always thought like, who really wants these blog posts that are like, how to X, what is X, right? So I always kind of leaned into, I want to write content that has a point of view. Now, it doesn't mean that the what is X, how is Y content is bad. It's just, if you have a niche in which there are high volume searches for terms like that, or just any term, right? And competition is relatively low, then I would say go for it. Like there's no reason you shouldn't want to do that, right? I mean, if you're in a niche where like something like, I don't know, like what is say about personal finance, right? Maybe there are sub niches within that niche that competition is not that high. And if your product or your offering is aligned with that, then you totally should SEO the heck out of that. So that's kind of how I think about it. I think maybe in an ideal organization, you would have blog posts that are kind of for the SEO purposes. And then you would also have content that has a point of view that's kind of more in line with the sort of zero-click content ethos. And hopefully there'd be a way to kind of cross-link these kinds of posts where if you have maybe something, okay, here's an example. Maybe something like, what is a buyer persona? Has high volume in search. I think competition is high, but let's say it's low competition. Maybe I would want to rank for that. And I would write my own blog post on what it is. But then I would lead with my audience personas post, which is the point of view. And then maybe I would link to the buyer personas thing. Maybe I would say like, by the way, if you really do want to create a buyer persona, you should read this post instead, or you should also read this post. So sort of a long-winded answer, but I think that gets it.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate that. And I want to pick up on the post that you did about zero-click content that is presently your pinned post on your Twitter profile, right? It was amazingly successful. It was so good. And I did notice that this is on the same theme, I promise. But I noticed about 3/4 down the thread, then you posted the link to the longer form blog post. So you were doing exactly a version of that. Out of curiosity, and you don't need to share numbers or anything like that. Indeed, you may not know them, because I certainly don't know every blog post number on my site. But did you see like a big spike on website traffic as a result, or was it sort of actually more on platform, more on Twitter in that particular circumstance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, so not all of my blog posts and the way that I promote them, not all of them do result in a lot of page views, but for zero-click content, it did. We got like a nice little spike. I think, if I recall correctly, I think we got like 6,000 or 7,000 uniques in a day, which is a lot for us.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot for us.
Absolutely.
So there was that. I would also say the other things that I noticed with that was the way that zero-click content, or that phrasing, really entered the zeitgeist, or the marketing zeitgeist, so to speak. Like the way that people have been using it, just sort of intuitively, just sort of like, oh, this makes sense to me. And people just kind of adding it to their existing language. And I started seeing it pop up in job descriptions, which was absolutely bonkers to me. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of an outlier, but I have seen stuff like that. And that kind of, I see one of the questions here in the Q&A that kind of dives in. Someone asked, Slavina asked, apart from impressions and engagement, what other metrics do you use to measure content impact towards organizational goals? And what types of attributions do you use for this? So that's related to what I just said right now, which is, aside from impact, I mean, I do place a lot of value on engagements, because to me, that really is like a human being is engaging with this. They're asking a question, they're adding on to it. Like that means a lot to me. And I pay attention to that. I engage with it back. I look for that. I look at social shares. I look at, if anyone kind of repurposes the content. I also look at things like, does this lead to something else? So sometimes content will lead to other opportunities. Mm-hmm. Another example I have of that was I posted a high engagement Twitter thread on sort of underutilized marketing tools or tricks. And one of them, I included a Clearbit tip, like use Clearbit or a tool like Clearbit to enrich the data of your existing email list. You'll get things like firmographics. You'll know what industries your audience works in, and then use those firmographics to plug into your SparkToro searches to better understand the audience. It gives you that full picture of it. And then Clearbit saw it, and then they reached out and they were like, hey, do you want to do a webinar together? Nice. And we got like just shy of 1,000 webinar signups. So I look for stuff like that. That I think is really impactful. And no fancy attributions. We're a little bit averse to that. We use Google Analytics, so we do use that. We have some goals set up within it, so we know what conversion looks like from a given page. But I think most of us here probably do that.
And it strikes me that thank you for that answer. That was spot on. And out of interest, I mean, you live in and work in like an organization which is like probably an almost perfect marketing organization. One of your leaders is a marketer through and through. And so when you're having these conversations about having already like buy-in about brand metrics and webinar signups and stuff like that, is that because there is a conviction in the company that these things definitely turn into revenue further down the line? Or I guess it must be, maybe I'm just making a point, I mean, so do you see that? I mean, when you see your 2,000 likes on a LinkedIn thread or whatever it may be, is it more short-term for you, or is it more of a long-term thing, particularly when you've got your free accounts turning into sort of accounts?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a long-term play. Mm-hmm. Because people use SparkToro for any number of given strategies or tactics. So really what we focus on is how can we provide what we feel is the most useful, most actionable, most helpful marketing advice, and get people to appreciate that, join that, tune in, and hopefully over time, it's sort of like building goodwill, and hopefully over time people will convert and become customers, or if nothing else, become advocates of our brand. To be like, oh, look, I don't have the budget for your offering. One day I will. Meantime, I'll be singing your praises. People sometimes say that.
I love that. No, I believe it, and I see it every day. And the reason I asked that question is, of course, it's difficult, and you addressed it in your presentation that to get buy-in for these things is not always easy. Yeah. If I could take a quick sidestep, because I want to ask about one of the takeaways, if I was to paraphrase very, very badly, is to make sure your content is playing to the respective native platforms, to post in a way that is friendly to the respective social media platforms that you may spend your time. Do you worry about overexposure to algorithms? So for example, your Twitter following is incredible. Like, you've got an active, engaged, people undoubtedly see what you have, so to speak, and think, yeah, I would love that. But do you worry that that could go away, or that it changes, or do you worry about that overexposure to platforms? And the reason I ask that is, one of my beliefs is that, like, a newsletter, for example, is fairly impervious to algorithmic changes. That's one of the real strengths, I think, of a newsletter, for example, which is an argument for getting people to your website quicker. And actually what we're seeing here, or what I've perceived from your talk, is like, engage a large amount of people on social media and probably keep a lot of them there. So do you worry about that overexposure, or is it not something that you worry about in your mind?
A little bit. I mean, it's definitely a fair point. It's kind of why I have a newsletter, so I do have my email list. I think I'm closing in on 8,000 subscribers for my newsletter. That's my personal one. And the SparkToro newsletter we just crossed 60,000 subscribers.
Brilliant.
So we put a lot of love into the SparkToro newsletter. Like I write every edition. I carefully vet all the content or the content that I share in it. Rand edits every one. Casey glances at it lovingly. Casey's our CTO. So like we put a lot of effort into that. And the result is like this 4 or 5 minute read where I think on the surface, somebody might see our newsletter and think like, oh yeah, they probably put this together in like 20 minutes. I wish I could tell you that's true. I spend honestly maybe like 3 hours on it every time I do it, because I spend a lot of time trying to make it super succinct, concise, useful, and I honestly maybe it's my ego at play. Like I want us to create the best marketing newsletter that we can. So I do think about the overexposure thing, and I want to push people to an email list because marketing to your direct audience in their inboxes is the best way to do it, right? And the other thing is, where I don't worry about it is these social platforms aren't going anywhere, right? I think like Twitter's not going to shut down anytime soon. Neither is LinkedIn. So to some extent, it's going to be there. Like we're going to be there. Sure, it's going to, I do think today, it's a lot harder to go viral with a thread than it used to be because a lot more people are writing them. But I still think maybe this is my optimism at play here, but I still think if you write something really great, that it'll rise above the fray.
That's perfect. No, spot on. No, good stuff rises and as exactly as you say. That's spot on. Thank you.
We have a few minutes left. I do want to make sure we get to the rest of our questions.
Of course, yes.
So the next one here. So Emma Cohen asked, what are the 3 top reasons to aim for zero-click content? I want to be ready for questions from senior management about this. So part of it was the content sustainability. So that's one piece. So one, pitching it as like you're getting a lot more utility out of the content you're already paying for. If you have a blog budget or a white paper budget, then it's allowing yourself to level up and repurpose that in a number of ways. So that's one, sustainability. 2, I would say it's making the case for reducing your dependence on pay-to-play platforms, aka advertising. The more that you can build your audience, your following, get people to engage with your content, the less you're going to be dependent on just driving clicks through a Facebook ad. So that's another piece that I would think about. And the third one is it provides a healthy foundation for co-marketing, brand marketing, the things like that don't always need budget for. Like when you do co-marketing, like a co-webinar with someone, it doesn't really cost money. It just costs money for, to get a webinar platform. So creating content that resonates with people, that results in you growing your audience, that makes you a more attractive co-marketer. And by extension, helps you to continue to grow your audience and build affinity by partnering with people who share your audience with you, but who ideally do not share competition with you.
That's amazing. So quite regularly, I'll say the currency of community is opportunity, and it feels like the currency of zero-click can also be opportunity in a sense, and that point is one oft underrated. So I appreciate you making that twice in the session because I think it's a really, really important one. I can also see, and you can too, we've got the other question from Richard in the Q&A. So let's take the time to address that too. Richard asks, do you think it's viable to mix zero-click and one-click/multi-click content to demonstrate that it works to a skeptical boss, or do you have to take the plunge and go all in?
I think you can totally test this. I think it's a good idea because it's a great idea to show your skeptical boss, like, hey, even if it's like testing it in small ways where you can say, hey, we did it the zero-click way and we got 20 likes and a couple of replies. We did it the multi-click content way and we got 1 like. Like I just think like, look, people are not engaging with this content. Because the other case I'd make is okay, you can't get attribution. I would also say, well, if you're doing this multi-click stuff, just posting links on social or top of funnel channels, and you're getting such few clicks, even if you can measure it, I would say, but then nobody's seeing it, right? Like if you're posting a post that gets like one interaction, the algorithm is going to ding it or not, but it's not going to prioritize it, and so no one's going to see it. So I would make the case of, we can either post content that gets seen and reacted to, or we can post content that nobody sees that we can measure clicks for. So I would kind of position it like that.
I like that. I like that a lot. It makes an awful lot of sense. It really does. It just makes sense. Amanda, that's the questions that are taken from the community in the Q&A, and likewise, I feel like I've had more than my share to ask my own. So all I can say is thank you so much. We've got Emma, Becky, Kelly, Leanne, Carol, and a bunch more that sort of said thank you earlier, who had to shoot but are going to catch it on catch up as well. So we've got Hill and Catherine as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. It's always such a joy, and hopefully giving you a new way to think about how you can get your content out there and seen by lots of folks. So with all that said, thank you very much, Amanda, for taking the time today. And thank you everyone for tuning in as well. You're endlessly appreciated and of course admired. With all that said, next Tuesday, we're back with a webinar all about how to get people involved in content creation. I'm sure many of us would have shared the pain of being sat at your desk trying to get your colleagues involved in content creation with you. If that sounds good, we hope to see you next Tuesday. So thank you very much, and see you